Speaker is Dr. Constantine Hatzidimitriou. Dr. Hatzidimitriou earned a PhD in Byzantine, Ottoman, and modern Greek history from Columbia University in 1988. He's currently an adjunct professor at St. John's University in New York. He was a Genocide Fellow of the American School of Classical Studies in Athens, Fulbright representative for Northern Greece at the U.S. Consulate in Thessaloniki, and a faculty member at Anatolia College. He has published in a wide variety of scholarly publications and participated in numerous conferences in the fields of Byzantine and modern Greek studies. His book, American Documents and Eyewitness Accounts of the Turkish Destruction of Smyrna in 1922, was published in 1999. What should I do?
Actually, the book came out in 2005, I believe. I've been asked to summarize what I'm going to say. So, apparently for the television audience, so I'm going to summarize the whole talk. I'm basically going to try to make 3 points. The first point is to try to demonstrate that the tragic events of 1922 are still relevant today and should never be forgotten, because if they are forgotten, there's a danger that they'll be repeated. The second point is that the humanity of individuals can sometimes expose the corruption and inhumanity of governments and play a very important role in events. And the third item is that it is now certain that the Turks burned the city, and that this fact was covered up by the United States government and other governments. So those are the general sort of points that I want to make. Let me launch into my text. First of all, I want to thank George Mavropoulos and the members of the Pontian and Federation Societies of Chicago for inviting me to address you tonight. It is always a pleasure to visit this great Midwestern center of Hellenism, where I have so many friends and whose Greek American community is in many ways a model for the rest of the nation. And I say that as a New Yorker. Your museum is still unique within our community, and Greek Americans have more influence in public education here than elsewhere in the United States. A fine example of this is the curriculum resource on the Pontian genocide, which I understand is being used by your schools, and the support of your local politicians in promoting Hellenic education within the American mainstream. I can tell you that we don't have such things in the public education system in New York City, because I'm an administrator and I was in charge of social studies for about 300 schools in the New York City area. When I'm here, I also remember that I'm in the home of the late Andy Copan and Charlie Moskos, who did so much to promote the understanding of our ethnic history, and of Kouhartaris, an old warrior who continues their work, where Saeb is perhaps most active. And I must also point out to you that you should all be aware of a precious resource unique to your community here in Chicago. You have Steve Frandos. Where is Steve? There. Who knows more than anyone in the world about the history of Greek America and should be consulted often and listened to in these matters. Please always remember that our Pontos and Trebizond are a vital and integral part of Anatolian Hellenism and Greece, Hellas as a whole, and should never be treated as a separate nation apart from our common homeland. What happened to Pontian Greeks happened to all of us and was part of a larger process that began during the late Byzantine period and resulted in many lost homelands, Kamenes Patrides, and is a phenomenon which I hope to explain. As I hope to explain, I am afraid is not yet over. Let me begin by telling you all that I am the son of Anatolians. My mother, Eli, was born in Buza, a beautiful suburb of Smyrna, one of Hellenism's great cosmopolitan centers, which tragically, like so many others, no longer exists. I came to this subject because of a key, a clivi, a key to our lost home that my maternal grandmother, my yaya, kept for her entire life and passed on to my mother and was brought to America, and I have in my home because my grandmother always thought that she would go home to Smyrna and kept the key for her entire life. So I take this subject in a very personal way. It's not just an academic exercise for me. These Hellenic urban centers like Budza and Smyrna no longer exist, not because of some natural disaster, economic circumstance, or voluntary migration, but because of the deliberate, systematic policy and actions of Ottoman and Turkish national governments to ethnically cleanse historically Greek lands which they perceive to be their own, through a process that scholars have identified as Turkification. While it is true that what happened in Asia Minor in 1922 was the direct result of World War I and Greece's Anatolian venture, it was also a part of a larger historical process that had gone on for centuries. In Asia Minor, Turkification and de-Hellenization began during the 14th century, and this earlier phase has been studied in great detail by my friend and colleague, Spiros Vrionis, who has also recently illuminated the destruction of the Greek community of Constantinople in a massive book. Now, you may think that this process and these matters are historical anomalies, ancient history, of interest only to pedantic scholars of obscure subjects, and unrelated to our modern world and the enlightened times in which we live. However, as I hope to show in the brief time allotted to me, that the often used and tiresome phrases, those who ignore history are doomed to repeat it, or history repeats itself, are highly relevant to today's subject and the destruction of Anatolian Hellenism. In fact, the process of Turkification is going on right now in parts of Cyprus and is nearly complete in Istanbul, once Constantinople and Hellenism's cultural and political and religious center. One also should add in Prosentenedos. Although the process is largely ignored around the world, what is shocking is that it has recently begun to be accepted and even condoned within Greece itself in a misguided attempt to be modern, avoid the feeling of being a victim, and gain some ill-conceived political advantages. In order to accomplish this, some Greeks are distorting their own history and have even promoted the rewriting of school books, which has recently raised some controversy. I have also discovered that this is not an isolated phenomenon, limited to 1922 and the catastrophe, but has been extended to the entire history of Turkish-Greek relations, even to the degree of attempting to present the 400 years of Ottoman rule in Greece as largely benign. In fact, this radical rewriting of Greek history has been in process for several years and has the support of several Greek and non-Greek scholars with exceptional credentials and a large segment of the public of Greece accepting it. What is especially odd to me is that this is all taking place when the Armenians, after decades of struggle, have finally won some measure of recognition of their own ethnic cleansing at the hands of the Turks during the same period. However, as we are all aware, even the Armenians, let alone the Greeks, have not been able to get the U.S. government to recognize their genocide as an official event, a disgraceful example of political expediency and interest, which places the so-called American strategic interests vis-a-vis Turkey above justice, historical accuracy, and I hope to prove simple truths, facts which have been known to our government for over 87 years. But let me return to the past for a moment and bring this tale of tragedy, greed, heroism, suffering on a massive scale, and also a time when individual Americans rose above government interest to commit what one courageous American woman called unauthorized acts of